by the rivers of Babylon. Yeah, we sat down and we cried when we remembered Jerusalem. We were sick, Lord, near to dying. Oh,
Shalom, shalom, family. Welcome to another Bible class, another Bible review. My name is Uzi Alewi, one of the teachers of Congregation D.C.B, CHOKMAH, located in the Red Hook section of Brooklyn, New York. Give all honor, praise, and glory to the Most High, King of the universe, for all things and everything. Giving him glory once again for all that he does for us, for allowing us to wake up again. Praying that the Most High God be with all those who are under the weather. Praying that the Most High God, creator of heaven and earth, will continue to bless us all, continue to watch over us and protect us as we are in this season, in this cold season where some people are, they get sick. You know, you contract colds and chest cold, head cold. Some people's asthmas get triggered. I know for my son that happens in the cold season. So I pray for him, and I pray for all those who might be going through any kind of ailment or sickness, that the Most High God will bless you all, protect you, keep you, strengthen you, be with all those who are sick or facing any kind of ailment, any kind of disease or anything of that nature. I pray that the Most High God be with all of you and that he protects each and every one of you. So how's everyone doing out there? I hope that everyone is good. I hope that everyone is prayed up. Today we will be going over the history of Hanukkah and its relations with the book of Daniel. All right? Hanukkah and the book of Daniel, the relationship. All right? So for that, I'm going to pass it on to my brother, Rabbi Chief Binyamin. How are you, my brother?
Yeah, I'm doing good today. Hopefully you are doing well, giving praise and honor to the Most High. Hopefully everybody else is out there doing well, doing great actually, also. So again, just giving praise and honor to the Most High and thanking him for this opportunity that he has given us to open up his word this day. As we do so, attempt to do so every Sunday morning, 9 a.m. I know we're starting half an hour late today. We're still getting some information together so that hopefully everything will be presented in a good fashion. So we do so every Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. And we invite everyone that utilizes the Bible as the foundation of their belief to join us in our conversation and join this discussion as we do so this week. Feel free to share with your friends, your family. Again, as long as you believe the Bible scriptures and of course believe in the God of the Bible, then this Bible study is for you. We're gonna veer off for the next, well, including this week, the next 2 weeks. From our discussion on Isaiah. We did start Isaiah chapter 40 with the intent of going to the conclusion of the book of Isaiah chapter 66 and speaking about all of the prophecy within that. But because Hanukkah is coming up, the observance of Hanukkah is coming up within the next 2 weeks, we're going to begin our discussion of the book of the Maccabees and the book of Daniel. And we're going to actually discuss the relation between the two of them. Because there actually is a relation between the two of them. And when we talk about the book of Daniel, it's not going to be, it'll basically be an overview. It's not going to be very comprehensive in terms of, and we'll see as we go along. Because there are going to be probably a lot of questions when we're discussing the book of Daniel. There usually are. That's a book. It's a book that people have been discussing, of course, for many years and trying to figure out what is being said and what is being meant within the book. So today we're just going to be speaking about the direct relationship between the book of Daniel and the Maccabean Rebellion, or also known as the Hasmonean Rebellion, and how it relates, or how both relate to the observance of Hanukkah, again, which is going to be coming up. So again, this is just going to be a comprehensive overview of sorts. Normally what we do each week is spend 20 minutes, maybe up to half an hour on the discussion of the topic for the day, and then leave the remaining time open for questions and comments from those that may have any. So hopefully I will be able to still follow that format today. So before we get into that, we will have a slideshow presentation to be shared shortly. So again, we're talking about Daniel and the Maccabees and how they relate, how the two books relate. So you have Daniel, again, the book of Daniel, which appears in the Old Testament of the Bible. Then you have the book of First Maccabees, which appears in some versions of the Bible. Actually, in most versions of the Bible, even those that include both the Old and the New Testament, you do not find the book of Maccabees there. But there are limited versions of the Bible, especially older ones, which include the book of First Maccabees. But right now, the fastest way to find the book of Maccabees is in a book called the Apocrypha, which contains not just the Maccabees, but other writings, other scriptures, which historically would appear or would have occurred between the events of the Old Testament and the events of the New Testament. And again, not all Bibles, or most Bibles, don't include the book of Maccabees. You'll also find within the Apocrypha, and then also those same English versions of the Bible, or I should say not just English versions, but also some of the previous Latin versions of the Bible, books such as Judith, books such as Esdras, books such as Ben Sirach, which is also known as Ecclesiasticus, as well as other books that would appear in the Apocrypha or in some versions of the Bible. So in the book of Daniel, it contains both a historic narrative and prophetic visions. We'll be discussing that as we go along. But the first 6 chapters of the book of Daniel are basically of historical value. And then the last 6 chapters are basically of prophetic or apocalyptic value. Sort of like how when we discuss in the book of Isaiah, the first 39 chapters are historic, and then the last 20 or so chapters, about 26 or 27 chapters actually, of the book of Isaiah from chapter 40 to 66 are prophetic. So same way the book of Daniel is separated. It's 12 chapters in all. The first 6 are historic. The last 6 are prophetic or apocalyptic of sorts. And overall, you'll see like a current theme throughout the book of Daniel. It talks about the Israelites, the future of the Israelite people, from the perspective of Daniel as he's living in Babylon, and he existed, of course, even during the fall of the Babylonians and when the Medes came up afterwards. And it talks about specific times and events in Israelite history. And again, prophecy from the perspective of Daniel. So it talks about the restoration of Israel, because at this time where Daniel is living, this is the time during the 7-year period that God specified that the children of Israel would be in captivity, which started with the Babylonians, who took the southern kingdom into captivity. And along with that, in the final wave of the captivity of the Babylonians taking the southern kingdom, they destroyed the house of God, also known as the temple. So in Daniel chapter 2, It describes a dream of Nebuchadnezzar, who is the king of Babylon at this time. He is the king that took the children of Israel into captivity from the southern kingdom. He is the king of which Daniel, who's of course this book is about, he's living during that time frame. And Daniel chapter 2 talks about a dream of Nebuchadnezzar, again, who was the king of Babylon. And he wanted his people, when he had the dream, it startled him, it upset him, it confused him, it angered him. He had different emotions based on the dream that he had. So he had his people, he called all his people together, the magicians, all the people that prophesied, all of those people that basically had quote unquote skills within his kingdom. And he told them to interpret the dream, but he didn't just tell him interpret the dream. He asked them, or he told them, not just asked, he told them to tell him what the dream that he had was and give him the interpretation. Of course, nobody was able to do that. Daniel was able to do so, and Daniel gave credit to the Most High God. He said, there's a God in heaven, just paraphrasing, that can interpret dreams. So Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar of the dream that he was having and also explained the interpretation of the dream. So Nebuchadnezzar's dream, as explained by Daniel, is in the latter part of chapter 2. The former part of chapter 2 talks about, again, Nebuchadnezzar having a dream and him going to his people and asking them to tell him what the dream was and to interpret it. So in the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, he saw an image. It was a statue. It had a head of gold or fine gold, as it explained it, which represents Babylon. Because after Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar what the dream was, he gave him the interpretation right after. So Daniel described the image that he saw, which had a head of gold, which he told him was himself, King Nebuchadnezzar, and Babylon. So we see here that the head of fine gold is Babylon. Then you had the breast and arms of silver. Daniel didn't tell him what that kingdom was, but he said it would be a kingdom that would come after. Now, based on history, and we're connecting everything in the book of Daniel together, because everything's going to have a similar theme all throughout. So that breast and arms of silver are the Medes. Then you had the belly and thighs of brass, which represents the Persians. Then you had the legs of iron, which represents Greece. And then on that image, it had feet of iron and clay, because again, it went from the legs of iron, which are the Greeks, and then to feet of iron and clay. So that represents a divided kingdom. So the iron is basically continuing on from the Grecian kingdom, but that clay mixed in shows again that it was a divided kingdom. Now, historically, you could look at the Diadochi, and this would be the divided kingdom of the Greeks that appeared after Alexander. So Alexander is known also, people call him Alexander the Great. He was basically a great ruling king who expanded the Greek reign, not just in Macedon, where he's from, but throughout what we would know today as the Middle Eastern territory, also in Northern Africa, extending into Asia as well. So after him, the kingdom was divided into many kingdoms. And then it also, then after a period of time, those many kingdoms ended up just being 4 kingdoms. And that's what we read about in the book of Daniel, and that's what we read about historically as well. So you had the feet of iron and clay, which would represent the Diadochi, if that's being pronounced properly. But again, you can look that up and you'll see that would be the kingdoms, or the kingdoms, or the kings, or the generals of Alexander who reigned after Alexander died. Then you had a stone cut out without hands, which represents the nation of Israel. And as we're speaking about the Hasmonean revolt, or the Maccabean rebellion, we'll see that this stone cut out without hands, it represents Israel, the nation of Israel, but it's specifically talking about the Maccabean revolt and how they came out of nowhere and basically destroyed this feat of iron and clay. And of course, after that, the entire image of the beast came down. So Daniel chapter 7 also speaks about 4 kingdoms, but it doesn't speak about it in one image. It speaks about it via 4 beasts. So you had a lion with eagle's wings, which represents Babylon again. Again, as it relates to what we read in chapter 7 is going to relate to what we read in Daniel chapter 2. So the lion with eagle's wings is going to be Babylon. The bear is going to be the Medes. He saw a leopard with 4 wings. And by the way, this is Daniel's dream. Daniel chapter 7 is Daniel's dream, as opposed to Daniel chapter 2, which was Nebuchadnezzar's dream. So again, just going back, the leopard, the 4 wings is Persia. Then you had a terrifying and powerful beast, which represents Greece. This beast had 10 horns. And again, this symbolizes the fragmented power of the Greek Empire after Alexander the Great's death. Again, representing the Diadochi, which we spoke about in relation to Daniel chapter 2. So again, the same information was repeated to Daniel as he had his own dream about that. So now we're going to speak about this little horn in Daniel, because it mentions the 10 horns that came up. And then there was one conspicuous horn that came up, or one little horn, as it mentioned. So the kingdom, there was a kingdom that rises after the Greeks, which oppressed the children of Israel. And this little horn that comes up is going to be Antiochus IV, or Antiochus Epiphanes, as when we're actually going to go into, which won't be, again, this is just a comprehensive overview of the book of Daniel as it relates to the book of Maccabees. When we actually speak about Hanukkah next week and get more in detail with the events in the book of Maccabees specifically, then we'll speak more about Antiochus IV, also known as Antiochus Epiphanes. But this little horn represents him and talks about the oppression that he gave to the children of Israel. And this period of oppression actually lasted about 3.5 years. And this is very important, because as we're going through the book of Daniel and relating it to the book of Maccabees, this 3.5 years or 3.5 years or 3 years and some months, this is very important for us to understand as we're reading the book of Daniel and as it relates to the Maccabees, because the period of oppression of Antiochus IV, when he came in, and we're going to speak about that shortly, when he came in to the southern kingdom of Israel, again, this is known as Judah, and he went to the temple. He offered a sacrifice at the temple to a foreign god, which we'll speak about shortly. And then that sparked the Maccabean rebellion. And from that period of the Maccabean, from that period of time, when the temple was desecrated, the temple of the children of Israel, the temple of God actually was desecrated, to the rededication of the temple was actually 3.5 years. And again, you read that more specifically in the book of the Maccabees. So again, from 168 to roughly to 165 is going to be within that 3.5 years. So that's the oppression that took place from this little horn. Daniel chapter 8, Daniel had another dream. And this is a vision where he had, he saw a ram and a goat. So you had the ram, which represents the Medo-Persian Empire. So now this dream is going to condense the Median-Persian Empire into one, as opposed to the other dreams which had them, or the other visions which had the Medes as one kingdom, because the Medes was actually the kingdom that rose after or took over Babylon. And then the Persians is basically because when Cyrus entered into Babylon, he took over. He was just in charge of the Median Empire at that time. But when he took over Babylon, then he was able to extend his reign. And that's where we get the precursor of the Medo-Persian Empire. So the ram represents those two kingdoms coming together as one. So you have the ram, it has 2 horns, which represents, again, those two kingdoms as one. Then you also, in this vision of Daniel in chapter 8, you had a goat, which came and knocked out the Medo-Persian Empire, and that would be Greece. And then it speaks about a little horn again, as we also know about the little horn in Daniel chapter 7, which represents Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who desecrates the temple of God. Also in Daniel chapter 8, it talks about 2,300 evenings and mornings. And that, again, relates to the period of desecration, which is approximately 3.5 years, again, from 168 BCE to 165 BCE. And again, this is all historical. So far, we've seen the connection of Daniel chapter 2 to Daniel chapter 7, and now to Daniel chapter 8. And Daniel chapter 9, which we're not going to speak about in its entirety at this time, But within the vision of Daniel in chapter 9, it speaks about a 70 weeks prophecy. And we know based on just calculation and what we see, that the 70 weeks is talking about 70 weeks of years and not 70 weeks of days. So that would be a span of 490 years. Again, we're not speaking about the entire Daniel chapter 9, but we're going to speak about this last week, because in the Daniel chapter 9, it talks about a final week. And it talks about half a week where you'd have a prince coming up and desecrating the temple of God, and also making a covenant with the people, which again, when we read in the book of Maccabees, Antiochus makes a covenant with the children of Israel as he's attempting to Hellenize the people. So he makes a covenant with them for half of a week. So this half of the week is the same 3.5 years that we've been speaking about prior to this point. And the end point is the rededication of the temple, again in 165 BCE, marking the end of the final week, so to speak. And then now there's also a recurring theme in the book of Daniel speaking about the abomination of desolation, or you may just see some verses just speak about abomination and some verses just speak about desolation. This here is, the abomination of desolation is historically a statue, or basically an idol, of the Greek god Zeus, which was placed on the temple site, and also on the altar of Jehovah God, which was on that site. Antiochus had pig's flesh or swine's flesh sacrificed on that idol, on that altar, to desecrate that altar, and also that idol of Zeus that was there desecrated the entire temple. So this is something that we read about Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. We talked about he will put an end to the sacrifice and offering and set up an abomination that causes desolation, which is what Antiochus did. He set up that abominable idol, and he desecrated the altar, and it caused desolation because this is where children of Israel who wanted to live by the covenant of God basically left the area and started going into villages on the outskirts. And in Daniel chapter 11, verse 31, it speaks about Antiochus. It doesn't mention him by name, but it speaks about, this is the altar where he places an altar to Zeus in the temple. So again, this is talking about the abomination of desolation, which is a recurring theme within the book of Daniel. And in Daniel chapter 12, verse 11, it speaks about the 1,290 days, which refer to the desecration before the temple is restored. So again, this is that approximate 3.5 years from the time that the temple site was desecrated up until the rededication. So again, this impact led the Israelites, well, the impact on the Israelites, it caused the Maccabean rebellion. So again, this is something that, this abomination of desolation is something that is very key as it reoccurs all throughout the book of Daniel. And as a result of that, just taking the book of Daniel into consideration overall, again, this is just a comprehensive view. Based on everything that we are discussing or have been discussing and will continue to discuss, everything in the book of Daniel already occurred. So some people view that there are going to be, or view it as there are events in the book of Daniel that are still to come, but everything in the book of Daniel occurred already, because everything in the book of Daniel is pointing to the Maccabean rebellion. And so just speaking about Antiochus Epiphanes himself and his persecution of the Israelites, he was a Seleucid king. Again, we'll speak more about him in the future. It talks about it, we have his reign from 175 to 164 BC overall. That's his reign of the Seleucid kingdom. And he sought to Hellenize the Israelites by outlawing their practices. He outlawed Torah, the reading of Torah. He outlawed circumcision. He outlawed the observance of the Sabbath day. He outlawed anything that would connect the children of Israel to Jehovah God. So this is that one horn that came up and spoke great things against the Most High, or the Most High's people, as we read earlier in the book of Daniel. So again, the book of Daniel is pointing to the abomination of desolation, which was set up by Antiochus IV, also known as Antiochus Epiphanes, that occurred, that lasted for 3.5 years, or basically a half of a week, and how the Maccabean rebellion started in order to cleansed the temple. So in 168 BCE, he desecrated the temple in Jerusalem, placing the statue of Zeus and sacrificing pigs. And his rule marked a period of intense persecution. There was, again, the persecution was the desolation. Once he committed that act, or had his people commit that act, the children of Israel that were not trying to be Hellenized went into the outskirts of Jerusalem, or the outskirts of the land itself, into various villages. Even some had to go up into the mountains to hide out in order to observe the Sabbath day. You would see, again, this is a period of time of persecution for the children of Israel and the desolation of the land, or primarily of the temple itself, because he's the one that stopped the daily sacrifices. So again, the stoppage of the daily sacrifices is something that we read about in Daniel chapter 9, and Antiochus is the one that caused that. So the Maccabean rebellion, or the Maccabean revolt. The Maccabees are basically a group of Israelites. They started off being led by Mattathiah and his sons, who include Judah Maccabee, who ended up, after his father Mattathiah died, he was the one that took over as general of the Maccabean revolt, also known as the Hasmonean rebellion. So in 167 BCE, Mattathiah refuses to worship pagan gods. You read about these events again in the book of First Maccabees. Then in 166, Judah Maccabee, he takes over. He leads a successful military campaign, or actually campaigns, against the Greeks, or against the Seleucid kingdom led by Antiochus IV at the time. Then in 165, the Maccabees recaptured Jerusalem, cleansed the temple, and restore proper worship for a period of time. And that's where we get the institution of Hanukkah. So you have the rededication of the temple in Hanukkah, which is basically the celebration of the rededication of the temple. Again, these years are actually very important. This 165 BCE, because again, just counting backwards from that, we get 3.5 years from when the abomination of desolation was set up in the temple. And when we actually go through a more comprehensive view of the book of Maccabees itself, we won't see years of 165 BCE, but we'll see years mentioned within the book of Maccabees. And again, we'll get that 3.5 years from that. The temple is cleansed and the menorah is relit. And the event is celebrated as Hanukkah, commemorating the Israelite victory and the restoration of the temple. So again, that's how we get the celebration of Maccabees. So again, today we just wanted to talk about the book of Daniel and how it relates to the Maccabean rebellion. And again, everything that we read in the book of the Maccabees points to this is now, as we just doing an overview, everything speaks about 4 kingdoms. It talks about Babylon, it talks about the Medes, it talks about the Persians, it talks about Greece. And this is where the visions end in the book of Daniel, talking about Greece. And it actually mentions Greece in a couple of verses, Greece specifically in a couple of verses in the book of Daniel. So the book of Daniel is actually ending off talking about the kingdom of Greece, and specifically talking about the Seleucid king Antiochus IV and what he did in desecrating the temple of the true God, Jehovah God, by setting up that abomination of desolation, and how it led to the Maccabean revolt and the rededication of the temple of God. So again, we just wanted to go through an overview of the book of Daniel and how it relates to the book of Maccabees. So we do thank the Most High for this opportunity to discuss his word this day. We didn't go through specific Bible passages today, but we referenced Bible passages in our discussion. So we thank the Most High for the opportunity to do so, and just praying that the information was truthful and we do not lead astray nor be led astray. So what we're going to do at this time is open up the remaining time that we have. Again, we usually carve out an hour. We did start half an hour late, so we're going to give people an opportunity to ask their questions. And so for this, I'm going to return it to Chief Uziel, who will moderate this portion of our discussion of our Bible study this day. So again, just thanking you all for participating this day. Continue to share with your family and friends. Also, make sure that you subscribe to this channel, so that way you'll be able to participate even further, get information about when broadcasts occur within this channel.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. I told her about Rabbi. So like we always do, the doors are open for questions, and I see one right. Let me do this live chat. Make sure I'm catching everybody's questions. Let me see. Things they don't discuss in church. Does Daniel 2, verse 21, suggest that the Most High sets up wicked kings and leaders also?
What chapter and verse is that again?
Chapter 2, verse 21.
My initial answer will be yes, he does, and we see that within the Bible. But just to go specifically to Daniel chapter 2, and you said 31.
Could Daniel 2:34 of the stone cut without human hands be symbolic language of Yeshua being born with a father, without a father?
Oh no, go back to the
let me see, Daniel 2:21.
21. Okay, it was 21, not 31. Okay,
21.
So 21. We'll start from 20. Daniel spoke and said, "Blessed be the name of God from everlasting, even unto everlasting, for wisdom and might are his." And this is where Daniel is explaining that the wisdom and understanding that he's going to receive and deliver to King Nebuchadnezzar is coming from God. And it says, "And he changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. He reveals the deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him." And chapter 21, it just specifically mentions that he removes kings and sets up kings, but this would include every king that existed on earth. And even today, it speaks about every president and every prime minister of a nation, and the countries and kingdoms that still exist that have kings today is speaks about that as well. So yes, God would set up evil kings as well as good kings.
You got the other one, right?
No, yeah. So mention the next one now.
Daniel 2:34. Of a stone cut out without human hands, be symbolic language of Yeshua being born without a father.
It's speaking about the children of Israel, because again, as putting everything in perspective, and it's talking this final kingdom are the Greeks, and the feet, and this again, we talk about Daniel chapter 2. The final kingdom being the Greeks, the legs of iron, and then it talks about the feet of part iron and clay. So again, we're talking about the Diadochi or the Diadochi, which occurred or which appeared after Alexander died, and how the kingdoms that rose up after Alexander died and eventually led to just the 4 kingdoms. You had the Macedonian kingdom, you had the Ptolemy kingdom, you had the Seleucid kingdom, and the final kingdom slips my mind right now. But they were basically Turkey. But there was a different name for it at the
Seleucid,
time.
Ptolemy, the 4 generals that split.
Well, the 4 kingdoms. The 4 actual
kingdoms after Alexander passes away.
Yeah.
You have the Ptolemaic. You got the Seleucid. You got the. I'm gonna tell you right now. Those names are difficult, so.
You have the Ptolemaic kingdom, the Seleucid kingdom, the Macedonian kingdom. The other one is going to be the Seleucid kingdom is Syria. The Ptolemy kingdom is Egypt. The Macedonian kingdom, of course, is Greek proper. And then you had the kingdom that was basically in charge of Turkey or Anatolia, as it was known pretty much in ancient times. But it had a actually different name.
Yep.
So in terms of specifically 34, again, this is talking about kingdoms. So as this image, which the head of gold is representing a kingdom, and everything is a successive kingdom afterwards, it doesn't change from talking about a kingdom to an individual. So verse 34 says, thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. So again, this stone cut out without hands came and
You're
destroyed
talking
that
about the anti-gonid kingdom. I think that's what they
for
call
the
it.
fourth kingdom.
Huh?
You talking about for the fourth kingdom?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just couldn't remember the
Anti-gonid. I don't know how. Antigonid Macedonia. Let me see. Seleucid Empire, the Antigonid Macedonia, and the Attalid Pergamon.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's Turkey.
Yeah.
That's Anatolia.
Yeah.
And that would be Turkey.
Right.
So going back to Daniel chapter 2, verse 35, then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken in pieces together and became like the shaft of the summer threshing floors in the wind. 5. For as much as thou sawest that a stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. So again, it's talking about kingdoms, and it's not talking about an individual. And that's what this image is speaking about.
Any more questions? Does the fourth beast of Daniel, chapter 7, verses 23 to 28, represent Rome?
No, it will represent Greece. Every final beast in the book of Daniel represents Greece. There are various Christian interpretations that pointed to Rome, and of course, the Christian interpretations that were pointed to Rome would do so to point it to the New Testament, because the New Testament occurs, the history of the New Testament occurs during the Roman Empire's reign. So so again, with a Christian interpretation, they would point it to Rome. But when we actually read within the book of Daniel, it's pointed to Greece. It's speaking specifically about Antiochus IV, and it actually mentions Greece. So we could actually point those two verses in the Bible that speak of, or in the book of Daniel, that speak specifically about Greece. So you have get it up there, the verses up there quick. And it's in chapter 8 is one of them. So chapter 8, verse 21 says, and the rough he-goat is the king of Greece, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. And of course, the first king that is speaking about is Alexander. Of course, we know that Alexander's father reigned, but from the perspective of the history or the prophecies being given, is speaking about Alexander being the first king. But again, Daniel chapter 8 speaks specifically about Greece. Then there are 2 other chapters that mention it. I just want to pull those up as well. So it's chapter 10 and then 11, which will mention it. So again, just to, even though it's being slowed down right now, just to prove that the final beast is Greece, is consistent. Daniel chapter 10, verse 20. Then he said, knowest thou wherefore I come unto thee, and now will I return to fight with the prince of Persia, and when I go forth, lo, the prince of Greece shall come. So now we didn't discuss Daniel chapter 10, but it's another vision that was given to Daniel, and it's basically speaking about this battle of these kingdoms, but more from a spiritual perspective, and how each kingdom has a representation representation, has a messenger which represents it. So this is where, again, Daniel chapter 10 is saying that after Persia will come Greece. So this is telling us that the last kingdom of the book of Daniel is speaking about is Greece. And then in Daniel chapter 11, starting from 1, and as for me, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to be a supporter and a strongholder to him. And now will I declare unto thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And when he is waxed strong through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. So again, Greece specifically is mentioned in these 3 verses in the book of Daniel, and it speaks about the final beast or the final representation, because of course in Daniel chapter 2 is not a beast, it's an image, but the final kingdom is Greece. So that's something that is consistent all throughout the book of Daniel, that the final kingdom would be Greece and not Rome.
It says here, who is the son of man that approached the ancient of days with the clouds in Daniel chapter 7 verses 13 to 14?
Going back to Daniel chapter 7. Of course, we'll do like an actual breakdown of each of these images in the future. Because again, that's why we mentioned it was just an overview connecting the book of Daniel to the Maccabees. So verse 13, actually we'll start from 11. Actually, we can start back further than that, but we're starting from 11. And I beheld at that time, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spoke. Again, this is this horn that speaks great things against the Most High God and the people of God, which are the children of Israel. I beheld even till the beast was slain and his body destroyed, and it was given to be burned with fire. So again, this is the children of Israel for that period of time, destroying or getting rid of the Seleucid armies out of the territory so they can reclaim the temple of God and rededicate it. And as for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. And I saw in the night visions, and behold, there came with the clouds of heaven one like unto a son of man, and he came even to the Ancient of Days, and he was brought near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting kingdom which shall not pass away, and his kingdom which shall not be destroyed. As for me, Daniel, my spirit was pained in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head affrighted me. I came near unto one of them that stood by and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me and made me know the interpretation of the things. These great beasts, and then again, we have to read everything so we can get everything in context. These great beasts, which are four kings that shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. So this is again speaking, the saints of the Most High are the children of Israel, and specifically talking about the Maccabees, who are also known as the Hasmoneans, and also you see connected with them, again, when we get to the book of Maccabees, more specific, talk about the Hasidim, which is those that are, for the term that we use today, pious, or also those that hold on to the covenant of God. And verse 19, and then I desired to know the truth concerning the 4th beast, which was diverse from all of them, exceeding terrible, whose teeth were of iron and his nails of brass, which devoured, break in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And concerning the 10 horns that were on his head, and the other horn which came up, and before which 3 fell, even that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things, whose appearance was greater than that of his fellows. So again, the final beast in this vision had the 10 horns, which again we spoke about being referring to the Diadochi, which were the many kingdoms that came up after Alexander. But then it got condensed into 4 kingdoms, which we spoke about just now. And there was one particular horn, which is going to be Antiochus IV, which came up and was greater as it mentioned, his appearance was greater than his fellows. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came, and the saints possessed the kingdom. So again, the Ancient of Days would be Jehovah God, and the saints of the Most High would be the children of Israel, and specifically the Maccabees who led the rebellion, who possessed the kingdom, again, being able to reclaim the temple and rededicate the site. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all the kingdoms, shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And as for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom shall 10 kings arise, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the former, and he shall put down 3 kings. So again, this Antiochus is putting down the other 3 kingdoms of the Greek Empire during his time. And his reign is different than the reign of the other kings and also the kings that existed before him. When you hear Chief Uziel speak about the history of Hanukkah and the history of the Maccabees, you will hear him often talk about how Antiochus, his reign was different because he didn't want everybody to have their own way of life or their own belief, but instead he wanted to Hellenize everybody and have everybody within his kingdom serve his gods. And that's why he set up the abomination of desolation at the temple, and he was doing so all throughout, everywhere that he reigns. So that's what made him diverse from the former, because whereas Alexander and everybody else after him in the Greek Empire allowed people to have their own way of life, he spoke great words against the Most High, as we see in verse 25. And he shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and he shall think to change the seasons and the Lord, and they shall be given into his hand for a time and times and a half. So we didn't speak about this earlier, but this times and times and a half is 3.5 years. So that's why it talks about him wearing out the saints of the Most High, wearing out the children of Israel, and he will change the seasons in the Lord for that 3.5 years, that time and times and a half. A time is a year, times is 2 years, and a half a time, so half a year. And you'll see it more it will be explained more in the Aramaic, which is on the other side. So a time is 1, and then again, times in the English, it just sounds like multiple times, but in the Aramaic, it's actually talking about 2 times. So a time, 2 times, and half a time. That's where you would get 3.5 years. And again, that 3.5 year period is something that is consistent all throughout the book of Daniel, and it's pointing to the same period of time. But the judgment shall sit, and its dominion shall be taken away to be consumed and to be destroyed until the end. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. Their kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey them. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts much affrighted me, and my countenance was changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. So again, this final kingdom will be the children. This final kingdom, in reference to the book of Daniel, after the Greeks, is speaking about the children of Israel and the period of time that they will be able to rededicate the temple and have some sort of relative peace within. Of course, they continue to have, when you read the book of Maccabees, they were still having wars with the Seleucid kingdom even afterwards. But they were at least able to establish the temple. And from there, that's where we read, historically about the Hasmonean dynasty. We started from that period of time, and the children of Israel were able to establish themselves in the land, even though they were warring with the Seleucids and everybody else that came up afterwards, even up until the Romans. But the Hasmonean dynasty started, and the children of Israel were able to have a period of relative peace, being able to worship at the temple site for that period of time.
Excellent breakdown, Rabbi. So the time of conflict during the history of Hanukkah is a 3.5 year conflict that they're having with with Antiochus. Is that correct?
Yes. And when we go more in depth with the book of Maccabees, we'll see that yearly breakdown and how it speaks about the 3.5 years. But again, as we have referenced in the book of Daniel, it's pointing to this 3.5 years, or in the book of Daniel, chapter 9, this half of a week. So again, we know that the 70 weeks is 70 weeks of years, then half of a year is half of a week of years is 3.5 years. So everything has been consistent with the book of Daniel and not pointing to any other period of time.
Things they don't discuss in church. Is Daniel 12, 1 through 4 still the future?
That would be past tense. And how we will, because we can, in the future, delve specifically into the book of Daniel and do so chapter by chapter. But Daniel chapter 11, again, as I said, and as for me, the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to be a supporter and a stronghold unto him. He's talking about Darius the Mede. And now will I declare unto thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And when he is waxed strong through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. We're not going to go into the entire book of Daniel, but we're starting here for a reference point, because this chapter talks about history of Persia, and as it led into Greece, and it talks about a king of the north and the king of the south. So now when it talks about the king of the north and the king of the south in Daniel chapter 11, it's talking about 2 of the generals, or 2 of the kingdoms of the Greeks that had the dominant power at one time. They were the other 2, the Macedonian Empire and the Anatolian Empire. They existed still during this time where you had the 4, but they were not as strong as the Seleucid kingdom and the Ptolemaic king. So now the king of the north is going to be the Seleucid kingdom, because the Seleucid kingdom, or Syria, was north of Egypt. The king of the south is represented the Ptolemaic kingdom in the south. And it's not, this chapter is not talking about what's happening to them at one period of time, but it's talking about, when it said the king of the north and the king of the south, it's still talking about a successive reign of the kings in the north, which is the Seleucid kings, versus the kings in the south, the Ptolemaic kingdoms. And that's what this chapter is talking about. And then when we get towards the end of Daniel chapter 11, because somewhere in there it does, again, mention the 3.5 years, the abomination of desolation. As we just scroll by this verse, which talks about the ships of Kittim, which represents Greece, or portion of Greece. Then and just again, to put everything in context, this is still talking about the north versus the south, or the Seleucid kingdom versus the Egyptian kingdom. And as it gets to the end, it starts to narrow it down just to speaking about the Seleucid kingdom, which is the king of the north. Verse 12 starts by saying, and at that time. So that series of words, and at that time, is speaking about the time at the conclusion of Daniel chapter 11, which is talking about the Seleucid kingdom. So as with when we had a discussion with Isaiah chapter 53, and how it's connected to the chapter or the chapters before it. And when you have a chapter breakdown, it may seem like it's a brand new thought or a brand new era. The wording within the chapters are very important. So in Daniel chapter 12, it says, and at that time, we have to consider what time is it talking about. And it's talking about the time that is being referred to at the end of Daniel chapter 11, where Antiochus is going to set up the abomination of desolation, and that period of time, that 3.5 years. So it said, at that time shall Michael, or Michael, which is when you're reading throughout the book of Daniel, you'll see that certain kingdoms are represented by a messenger, and these messengers are given names in the book of Daniel. Okay, that's a whole different discussion. So Michael is the representation of the children of Israel, or the one standing for the children of Israel. So he said, and at that time shall Michael, or Michael, stand up, the great prince who stands for the children of thy people, the people of Daniel. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to the same time, and that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to everlasting abhorrence. And they that are wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn the many righteousness as the stars forever and ever. And when we read in the book of Maccabees, you'll see how the Maccabees were forcing the children of Israel who did not want to adhere to the covenant to follow the covenant, to circumcise their children, to observe the Sabbath day. So that's how the ones that are wise are shining like the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness, because they were turning people to righteousness. And he said in verse 4, but thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. The time of the end of days, or period, or refer to the end of a period of time. Just as we read in the book of Genesis chapter 4, and it says in the Hebrew that at the end of time, that it speaks about the events of Cain and Abel. So the end of time or the end of days is always referring to the end of a period of time or the end of a period of days. It doesn't mean an end of the world or the end of everything in existence. So this is the end of that period of time. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood other two, the one on the bank of the river on this side, and the other on the bank of the river on the other, on that side. And one said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, how long shall it be to the end of the wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, when he lifted up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swore by him that lives forever, that it shall be for a time, times and a half. We read about that in the chapters earlier in Daniel, where a time, times and a half is 3.5 years. And when they have made an end of breaking in pieces the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. And I heard, but I understood not. That I said, oh my Lord, what shall be the latter end of these things? So the end of these things is talking about this period of time or these events that's being detailed within this chapter. And he said, go that way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed to the end of the time. The end of that period of time that's speaking about here. Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but they that are wise shall understand. So you have this battle between the wicked and the righteous, the battle between the Seleucid army led by Antiochus and the Maccabean army led by Judah Maccabee. And from the time that the continual burnt offering shall be taken away, and the detestable thing that causes abhorrence set up, again, this is the abomination of desolation. In this verse, it's saying it's called a detestable thing that causes abhorrence set up. There shall be 1,290 days, which we calculated earlier to be roughly 3.5 years. Happy is he that waits and comes to the 1,305 and 30 days, which is just basically 45 days after the previous verse, or basically a month and a half. But still, everything is taking place within a 3.5 year period. But go thou that way till the end be, the end of that period of time, and thou shalt rest and shalt stand up to thy lot at the end of the days. So again, this Daniel chapter 9 already occurred, because this history talking about the continual burnt offering being taken away for 3.5 years, based on the detestable thing that was set up for 3.5 years, has already occurred. So again, this chapter in Daniel, as well as everything in the book of Daniel, has already occurred.
What do we have here? Donna Pocket, Ecclesiastes 12:13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole. That's a statement. Flee from idolatry. Beware of the false prophets. Things they don't discuss in church. Matthew 24, verse 15 teaches that Yeshua renewed Daniel's abomination of desolation prophecy for an end-time future event.
Yeah, that would be a comment, assuming as opposed to a question, but everything that we read here, again, we have a consistency in the book of Daniel, 3.5 years from the time the abomination of desolation was set up.
I mean, but can I just say this? So the abomination of desolation during Daniel's time was the idol that was set up within the temple in the streets of Jerusalem and all the neighboring towns. Am I correct?
Well, specifically, just to be specific, even we have to mention the name of a false god, but specifically
Zeus.
the idol of Zeus that was set up at the temple site
At the temple.
by Antiochus IV.
Right. And he was worshipped, and there were certain rites and rituals that that happened during that time. Needless to mention, there were other festivals. In fact, the winter solstice festival that they celebrated was called the Aloha, which was this internet connection over here is a little bit shaky. I don't know what's happening, but it was called the Aloha, and they worship the gods Demeter, Dionysus, and Zeus during this festival. This is actually during the winter solstice celebration, which would be near or around this time. So I say all that to say this: if the desolation was an idol that man worship, regardless, despite whatever you want, if there was a statue of Moses, of what people thought was Moses, and people were worshiping it, would it not still be a desolation of or something
Abomination
that
of desolation.
yeah, abomination of desolation? If the people were worshiping
any idolatry would be
right
an abomination.
So today, the number one idol that's worshipped, whether people know or not, that he was a man, or whether people look at him as a god or whatever, is the statue of Yeshua or Jesus. He will be the biggest abomination, desolation today. Right? I'm not throwing a shot at any Christian or anything like that, but if we look at it in terms of that and what the people were worshiping during that time, Zeus back then during those times is the equivalent of what Jesus is today. Just think about it that way. In ancient times and in ancient societies, Zeus is the equivalent of what Jesus will be today in terms of the physical idol worship, meaning making a figure of a man and bowing down before it. I don't want to offend anyone that's a Christian, but you know, there is a command against that. Making an idol of the form of a man and bowing down before it, whether the person existed or the person didn't. That is definitely a command against, that is definitely a violation against the commandments of the Creator. So I don't know if you want to tap in on that.
Yeah, you were breaking up a bit, but hopefully people caught what you were saying. You're basically saying that any idol, you know, whether it's someone, just rephrasing what you said, whether it's someone that existed or not, or whether it was someone that was respected by God or not. You mentioned Moses, whether people wanted to worship or set up a statue to bow down to David, who was a man after God's heart, as was mentioned. So you mentioned any body that people would bow down to, even if not in the form of a man. When God told Moses to make a representation of a snake so people could look at it to get healed, when people later on in history started bowing down to it, that also was known as an abomination. That because it became an idol. It wasn't an idol. It wasn't a false god when God told Moses to do it, but when people started bowing down to it and gave it a name, Nehushtan, then it became an abomination of desolation at that time. So any idolatry would be an abomination of desolation, or an abomination that causes desolation. Desolation of the people of God, and also the desolation meaning that God would depart from those who are worshiping that idol.
That's right. All right, so you know, it begs to, you know, it makes us think a little bit. It makes us think somewhat. It makes us understand that the oneness of the Creator, the oneness of the true and living God, you know, He declares to be one, and besides Him there is no other. Those are all the things that we got to keep in mind, and not fall into idolatry. Do you think, someone asked the question, do you think that that's why there are snakes on the medical symbol?
Yes, the serpent or the snake on medical symbols was basically derived not from the idol that people bow down to later on in history, but it's basically showing as a sign of healing when God told Moses to set up that serpent on a pole or on a staff at that period of time so people could look at it to get healed. So people took that to be a medical symbol and to represent a sign of healing.
Well, technically what they will tell you is that it comes from the Greek. There was a Greek healer who also had a staff with the snake on it. But if you see the descending history, it begins with us, and some societies took some of the symbolism and made it part of their actual societies. The Greeks took from the Persians and the Medes, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, whoever was around. Same thing with the Romans. The Romans took everything the Greeks did and gave it their own name. So technically, if you research it, it's going to give the credit to a Greek, to some Greek healer. I believe. I could be, you know. Let me see here. I don't see any more questions, Rabbi.
All right. And again, just apologizing to everybody for the late start today. Hopefully the presentation was condensed enough to explain everything. But based on the questions that came up, and even the questions in the comments that came up throughout, that can help to enhance that previous presentation for future discussions, and also when we actually get more in depth with the chapters of Daniel, which we may do after we finish Isaiah, and also help us in our explanation of Hanukkah and the Maccabean Rebellion, as we will hopefully be able to do so, God willing, next week.
Right. So it's I just did a little quick research. The staff with the serpents on the medical vehicles. This is where they say they get it from, right? It's called the rod of Asclepius, and originates from Greek mythology, where Asclepius, the god of healing, is depicted holding a staff with a single snake wrapped around it. So, like I said, a lot of the things were taken from other kingdoms, and Greeks being one of the last kingdoms formed, and you know, they had a vast canvas to pick and choose from. But originally, yes, the healing rod with the snake with the healing rod, whatever, that was accredited to Israel, definitely. So since that is it, thank you all for joining us once again. We're going now to feed the the poor and the needy today. So just wish us luck with that. I don't know how cold it is outside right now, but if I wasn't cool with my sister Kanzi, I would take a rain check on this, but I'm going to go out there and brave the conditions. It's 35 degrees right now in New York City. It feels like 20-something, so. Yeah, we're going to meet. We're going to go to a man's shelter and a woman's shelter and try to do what we do. All of you who contributed, we appreciate you. I'm not going to put up the QR codes today because we're having trouble with Cash App. I don't know what's going on with Cash App. They're saying something about we violating their policy rules or whatever, and it's becoming a headache, and I don't want to keep putting up a QR code up there that's not working until I get this matter truly resolved. All right, so you could just donate to us on PayPal or on Zelle, info@DCB.org, until we get this Cash App thing resolved and working properly. I know that most people donate through Cash App. It's a more comfortable form of donating, but as of now, we're going to have to go PayPal or Zelle. PayPal don't give the amount of trouble that Cash App does, and Zelle is straight up. You know, most people have Zelle through they bank apps. So we appreciate everything that you do for us, and we pray that the Most High God will continue to keep us, protect us, guide us, give us that guiding light. So with that being said, at this moment, I pray that the Most High God will look over each and every one of us as I say these words. I pray that the Most High God will bless us all. Yevareka Yehovah Yishmareka. Ya'ir Yehovah Panawaleka Wikuneka. Isa Yehovah Panawaleka Weyasemlaka Shalom. May Yehovah bless thee and keep thee. May Yehovah make his face to shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. May Yehovah lift up his countenance upon thee and may he grant thee peace. Amen. Shalom, shalom, family. May the Creator of heaven and earth be with you all. Hallelujah. Shalom, shalom.
Let's get knowledge, wisdom, understanding. We'll do our standing. All praises to the Most High, His laws and commandments. The CHOKMAH BINAH here to push it through your speakers. Judgment, truth, and love should be coming from the leaders. Yeah, knowledge, wisdom, understanding. We'll do our standing. All praises to the Most High, His laws and commandments. The CHOKMAH BINAH here to push it through your speakers. Judgment, truth, and love should be coming from the leaders. Yeah.